The morning light slanted across the kitchen table, turning the edges of the villa contract a pale gold. Thomas had spread the pages like trophies, his voice warm and confident. "Just think, Nora," he said, tapping a pen against the final page. "No more taxes, no more upkeep. We can finally breathe." I smiled because that's what wives do when their husbands sound so sure. I made the coffee stronger than usual, pretending it was for him. The smell grounded me. He'd been talking about selling the villa for months, ever since the roof repairs bled through our savings. The place had been our retreat for 20 years. Pine walls, a stone fireplace, the smell of rain-soaked cedar. I'd thought it would be our last home, the one we'd grow old in. I leaned over the papers and traced my finger down the final page. His name was there in a bold, slanted stroke. Mine was missing. Just an empty line waiting for something. "Did you print my copy yet?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Thomas looked up from his tablet, eyes soft but quick. "Not yet. You don't have to worry, sweetheart. They only need my signature to close. I'll handle it." He said it like he'd done me a favor, like removing my name was some act of love. I nodded, but my pulse fluttered. "I thought it was in both our names," I said carefully. "It was," he answered too quickly. Then softer. "You trust me, right? I did what I'd always done." I said yes. He kissed the top of my head, his cologne faintly citrus and expensive. "Good. That's all that matters." After he left for his office, I sat with the contract still on the table. The blank lines seemed to glow brighter than the morning light. My name had never looked so absent. I should have called the realtor. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I took the papers to the drawer where we kept old holiday cards and slipped them underneath, as if hiding them would make the unease fade. That afternoon, Lydia called. She wanted to know what color dress I'd wear to Saturday's dinner. "Tom said it's a celebration," she said, her voice bright. "I hope you're finally getting your little beach house next." I laughed, but it came out brittle. Something like that. After hanging up, I found myself walking to the old photograph on the wall, us at the Villa Snow, on the roof, our kids small and red-cheeked. Thomas had his arm around me. The memory hurt in a strange way, like pressing on a bruise. His phone buzzed on the counter left behind. Reflex made me glance. The screen lit with a text from an unsaved number, wire complete. "Keep confirmation off record." My throat tightened. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The words were enough. When he came home that night, he was all charm again. He poured wine, talked about flights to Denver, laughed too loudly. I tried to listen, to be the easygoing wife, but something in me had shifted. Every word he said sounded like a performance. He reached for my hand across the table. "You're quiet tonight." "Just tired," I lied. He smiled, that same practiced, perfect smile that had once made me feel safe. "Then rest easy. It's all taken care of." But when I closed my eyes later, I saw only that line on the contract, empty and waiting. The next morning I woke before dawn. The papers were still in the drawer edges, crisp, faintly smelling of toner. I pulled them out and stared until the light returned. My name should have been there. It should have been proof that this life belonged to both of us. But it wasn't. And for the first time in 25 years, I wondered what else he'd signed without me. The house was silent except for the clock ticking in the hallway. I heard it differently that morning, not time passing but counting down. By Saturday evening, the house smelled like roasted rosemary and wine. Thomas believed in grand gestures, celebrations for every milestone, as he called them. He'd invited 3 couples from his firm, the kind who spoke in quarterly profits and Napa vintages. I set the table with our wedding china because he liked how it looked like we'd made it. When the doorbell rang, he greeted everyone with the same dazzling ease that first drew me to him. The confident voice, the hand on someone's shoulder, the laugh that promised security. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, carrying plates, smiling when spoken to, but something inside me stayed still. He lifted his glass. To new beginnings, he said. To freedom from old burdens. Everyone clinked their glasses, but the words stung. The villa wasn't a burden, it was a memory, and he'd sold it like a used car. Lydia caught my eye, then looked away, swirling her wine instead. During dessert, someone asked when we'd be visiting Aspen again. Thomas chuckled. We've moved on to bigger ventures. His tone was light, but I heard something behind it, relief maybe, or guilt disguised as confidence. Later, after guests left, he hummed while loading dishes like nothing could touch him. See, he said, it all worked out. You worry too much. I just didn't realize the villa was only in your name, I said quietly. He stopped one hand on the dishwasher door. His smile stayed, but it stiffened at the edges. You still on that? I was just... He turned then, gentle but sharp. Do you trust me or not? The question landed like a test I hadn't studied for. I nodded automatically, the old reflex. Of course. He exhaled, satisfied. Then let's not ruin a good night. Okay? That night in bed, he fell asleep instantly, his breathing deep and even. I stared at the ceiling fan, its blades slicing the dark into quiet pieces. The house felt full of noise, the echo of laughter, the clink of glasses, his voice repeating, Do you trust me? I used to think love was built on answers. Now I wondered if it survived only on the willingness not to ask. Around midnight, Lydia texted dinner was lovely. Tom seems happier than ever. You okay? I stared at her message for a long time, then typed back. Fine. Just tired. But my fingers hovered over the send button, wanting to add more, something about the missing line on the contract, or how the house didn't feel like mine anymore. I deleted it instead. On Sunday morning, Thomas whistled while making pancakes, cheerful, domestic, everything a man should be. He looked so ordinary that it almost fooled me again. After breakfast, he left for his meeting. He always called it that, never said where, never offered names. I waited until his car disappeared down the driveway, then opened the drawer where I'd hidden the papers. The ink had faded, slightly smudged at the corners. My missing signature still stared up at me. I wondered how many times he'd signed for me in other ways. Credit forms, insurance renewals, anything that kept me comfortably uninformed. I took a picture of the page with my phone, hesitated, then locked the image in a private album. It felt like a betrayal to keep evidence against my husband. But wasn't he the one who'd started that game? By afternoon, I was back in the garden trimming the hydrangeas when Lydia showed up unannounced, holding 2 coffees. Figured you might want company, she said. We sat on the porch, quiet for a while. The air smelled of wet earth and sugar. She sipped slowly. You and Tom are solid, right? I smiled, because that's what people expect. Of course. Good. She nodded, but her fingers tapped the cup. You know how he gets when work stresses him out. He said the sale's been complicated. My chest tightened. He told you that? She shrugged. Just said something about needing to move some funds quickly. You know how real estate is. Paperwork nightmares. I kept my face neutral, but my pulse pounded. Thomas hadn't mentioned any of that to me. Lydia seemed to realize she'd said too much and forced a laugh. Anyway, I'm sure it's all fine. When she left, I watched her drive away and felt the strange heaviness of gratitude mixed with fear. Lydia didn't mean harm. She was just part of the silence that protected him. That evening, Thomas came home with flowers, white lilies, my favorite. For you, he said, placing them on the counter. You've been patient through all this nonsense. We'll take a trip soon, promise. I nodded, smiled, and took the flowers, but the smell made me dizzy. He kissed my cheek and poured himself a drink. I noticed his hands trembled just slightly when he lifted the glass. Everything okay? I asked. He grinned too wide. Perfect. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to forget the empty signature line, the hidden text, the bank whispers I hadn't yet confirmed. But when he walked away humming again, I realized that trust, real trust, doesn't hum. It waits in silence, holding its breath. That night, I took the photo of the contract from my phone and stared at it under the dim bedside lamp. The missing signature no longer looked like an oversight. It looked like an erasure. And somehow I knew that if I asked him again, he'd only smile and make me feel foolish for doubting him. That might have worked once, but not anymore. The clock ticked toward midnight again, the same steady rhythm as before. Only this time, I didn't hear a countdown. I heard the beginning of something breaking. The bank lobby smelled like lemon polish and paper. I hadn't meant to come here. It just happened. I was downtown to pick up dry cleaning, but the branch sat across the street like a quiet dare. The sign gleamed in the sun. First Aspen Trust, the same name printed on the villa's sale documents. I told myself it was nothing, just curiosity. Yet my hands were already pushing open the glass door. Inside, the air was cool and polite. A young clerk with neatly combed hair smiled from behind the counter. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" I tried to sound casual. I just wanted to check on a recent deposit. Property sale proceeds under Thomas and Nora Cole. She typed quickly, glancing at the monitor. Then her fingers paused. "Would you like me to print the summary?" "Yes, please." When she returned, the paper trembled slightly in her hand. I took it, thanked her, and walked toward the exit before reading it. Outside, the wind caught the page and I pressed it to my chest to keep it from flying away. There it was, a withdrawal record. Nearly the entire amount gone, withdrawn as cash 2 days after the sale. Only a few thousand remained. The date matched the night he'd bought me lilies. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sudden absence of air. I folded the statement neatly and slipped it into my purse. Every step back to the car felt heavier. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud and uneven. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my palms were damp. I told myself to breathe, to think before accusing him. But when I saw his car already there, gleaming in the afternoon light, panic replaced logic. He was in the kitchen, humming again, sleeves rolled up, slicing lemons. "You're home early," he said. "I stopped by the bank," I said too softly. He froze. The knife hovered mid-air, blade shining. "Why?" I shrugged, aiming for nonchalance. "Just checking if the funds cleared." He looked up, then eyes sharp. "And they cleared," I said. I set my purse on the counter and met his gaze. "But most of it's gone." The air thickened. His jaw flexed once before he smiled, that same careful, rehearsed smile. I moved it. "Diversified accounts, sweetheart. You know how banks are these days." "Diversified," I repeated. "In cash." He laughed, a single dry sound. "You're misunderstanding. It's safer this way." "Safer for who?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Nora, please, don't start this again." "I just want to understand," I said, but it came out like a plea. He wiped his hands on a towel, the motion precise. "I've handled our finances for 25 years. You've never had to worry. Why change that now?" "Because you erased me from the paper," I wanted to say. "Because I saw the message on your phone. Because every time you smile, I feel like I'm standing in front of a mirror that doesn't reflect back." But instead, I said nothing. He kissed my forehead, gentle as always. "You're overthinking. Trust me." After he left the room, I exhaled a sound that wasn't quite a sob. It felt like air leaving something hollow. That night while he showered, I pulled out the statement again. Numbers glared under the lamplight, cruelly tidy. I took a photo, another small betrayal. Then I slid it into a book on the shelf, The Art of Simple Living. The irony didn't escape me. Sunday blurred into Monday. I went through routines, laundry, groceries, polite smiles at the neighbors. But something had shifted. Every noise startled me. Every silence asked a question. When I dropped off mail at the post office, I saw Lydia's car parked by the cafe. She waved me over. "I was just about to call you," she said, pushing a pastry across the table. Her lipstick was too bright, her smile too practiced. Tom says you're anxious. Everything okay? I stirred my coffee slowly. Did he tell you where he moved the money? Her hand stilled on the napkin. The money. The villa sale. Oh. She forced a laugh. He mentioned some transfers. You know how he is always chasing the next opportunity. I leaned in. Did he say who bought the villa? She blinked. I thought it was some investment firm. I studied her face, the flicker of uncertainty behind her eyes. So he didn't tell you either. Nora, she said softly. Maybe don't dig too deep right now. He's under pressure. Let him handle it. I smiled tightly. I think he already has. When I left the cafe, the sky was gray, the kind of color that hides snow. My phone buzzed as I got to the car. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Mrs. Cole. The voice was calm, male deliberate. This is Agent Harper with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. I'm calling regarding your husband's property transaction. The words fell one by one, cold and clear. I'm sorry, what? He repeated his name, his tone gentle but firm. I'd like to schedule a time to ask you a few questions. I don't understand. It's routine, ma'am. We just need clarification about your involvement. My mouth went dry. My involvement. A pause. You are listed on the documents, correct? I closed my eyes. The missing signature flashed in my mind. That empty line. No, I whispered. I'm not. There was silence on the line, then the agent spoke carefully. Then that's interesting. After the call, I sat in the car for a long time, engine off, phone still in my hand. Snow began to fall, light, soundless flakes melting on the windshield. When I finally drove home, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Fear had turned into something quieter, sharper. The truth was coming whether I wanted it or not. And when it arrived, I wouldn't be the one left blank. Lydia showed up the next evening without warning, her knock soft, almost apologetic. Through the frosted glass, I could see her silhouette, shoulders drawn, in a bottle of wine in her hand like a peace offering. I opened the door before she could ring again. You're a hard woman to catch these days, she said with a nervous laugh. I stepped aside to let her in. Thomas isn't home, I said automatically. I know. She hesitated, then added, I came to see you. She followed me into the kitchen. The overhead light cast her face in a pale wash. I noticed she hadn't done her hair and her mascara smudged at the corners. Lydia was always immaculate, something was off. I poured us each a glass of wine. The red shimmered under the light like something too bright to drink. She took a long sip before speaking. Tom told me you've been uneasy. He's worried. Worried about what I asked. She looked into her glass. You know how things can look from the outside. The sale, the money moving. He says you've been asking questions. I kept my tone even. And what did he say about the missing funds? Her eyes flicked up. He said you wouldn't understand the details. That hurt more than I expected. The words sounded like a verdict, the small, steady disqualification of a wife. I smiled thinly. He's right. I don't understand. We sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with things neither of us wanted to say. Then Lydia leaned forward. Nora, I shouldn't even be telling you this, but… She trailed off, chewing her lip. But what? She exhaled slowly. He's been under investigation for months, not just the villa. There are other deals. The bureau's been asking questions at his office. My stomach clenched. The FBI. She nodded. He said it's routine, that they'll clear him soon. But Nora… She swallowed hard. Don't get dragged into it. If they call you, just say you didn't know anything. I stared at her. They already did. Her wine glass froze halfway to her mouth. What? I got a call yesterday. Agent Harper. Color drained from her face. Oh, God. I wanted to laugh, not out of humor but from the absurdity. The sister who'd always defended him now looked terrified. You knew, I said quietly, all this time. Nora. Please, she said. I didn't know everything. I thought he'd fix it before it got serious. Fix it! I repeated the words, sharp as glass. He forged my name, Lydia. How do you fix that? Tears welled in her eyes. He said you wouldn't believe him if he told you. He said you'd panic. And he was right. She set down her glass, the stem trembling against the table. I thought if I stayed out of it, he'd tell you himself. He won't, I said. He never planned to. We sat in silence again, the kind that weighs more than noise. Outside, the sky had gone dark, the windows reflecting our faces like two ghosts trapped in a frame. Finally, Lydia stood. You have to be careful. If the agents think you knew, they'll come after you too. I almost laughed. He already made sure of that. My name's all over those documents except where it counts. She reached out, hesitated, then let her hand fall. I'm sorry, Nora. I should have said something sooner. I wish you had. After she left, I poured the rest of the wine down the sink. The smell turned sour as it mixed with the drain. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the bank statement and the photo of the contract open on my phone. The evidence didn't look like much paper and pixels, but they were pieces of the truth. And for the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I took a notebook from the drawer and began writing dates: villa sale, withdrawal, the night he brought Lydia's visit. My handwriting shook, but I wrote anyway. Each word was a small act of defiance. When Thomas came home, he was humming again as if nothing in the world could touch him. He noticed the wine bottle on the counter. You and Lyd have a good talk. I didn't look up. We did. He smiled. She's loyal, always has been. I closed the notebook. To you, maybe. He froze, then forced a chuckle. Don't start, Nora. You're tired. He walked past me, but his steps sounded too measured, like he was counting them. I waited until his door shut, then whispered into the quiet. You have no idea how tired. In the living room, the clock ticked louder than usual. Each beat sounded like a question, and every answer was the same. Something is coming. I didn't know if it would save me or destroy me, but I knew I couldn't look away anymore. The next morning began with the sound of the phone. It rang before sunrise, not the soft chime of a friend calling, but the sharp official tone that cuts through dreams. I reached for it with a hand still unsteady from sleep. Mrs. Cole. It was him again, the voice from yesterday. Calm, measured, carrying no emotion but authority. This is Agent Harper. I sat up. Yes. I'm sorry to call early, ma'am, but I wanted to ask if you'd be available to speak today. Preferably in person. I hesitated, glancing toward the bedroom door. My husband. This isn't about him right now. It's about you. Something in the way he said it, not threatening but definitive, made me agree before my caution could protest. I can meet you. Good, he said. There's a cafe on Maple Avenue, noon. The line went dead. No goodbyes, no promises. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank space on the wall where our wedding portrait had hung for years. Thomas had taken it down last month to replace the frame. It never returned. I realized now how many things had quietly vanished, little erasures I'd mistaken for accidents. At breakfast, Thomas acted normal. He read the paper, made jokes about market trends, complimented my robe. When he leaned over to kiss my cheek, I flinched. He didn't seem to notice. By noon, I was sitting in the cafe with my hands around a cup that had long gone cold. Harper arrived exactly on time, early 40s, clean cut, wearing a gray suit that looked too serious for this small town. His eyes were the kind that didn't miss much. Mrs. Cole, he said, offering a hand. Nora, I corrected. He nodded once. Nora, then. He sat opposite me, a manila folder in front of him. I appreciate you meeting with me. What's this about? I asked. He opened the folder, but didn't slide it toward me. We've been following a pattern of transfers related to property sales in Colorado and Utah. Your husband's name appears frequently. Yours appears once unsigned. I stared at him. You mean the villa? Yes. It was listed under your joint ownership, but the sale was executed without your authorization. That's illegal unless you provided written consent. I didn't. He studied me for a moment. Then you're not in trouble, not yet. But I need to know what you did know. I hesitated. He told me I didn't need to sign, that he'd handle everything. Harper exhaled slowly, as though he'd heard the line 100 times. Did you ask to see the final paperwork I did? He hid it. He nodded, taking notes. Do you have anything? Documents, statements, messages that could confirm this? I thought of the photos hidden in my phone, the notebook tucked behind cookbooks, Lydia's trembling confession. Yes. His eyes softened slightly. Then I need you to keep them safe. Don't confront him. Don't hint that we've spoken. I laughed a small, bitter sound. You think he'd notice? People like your husband always notice, he said quietly. I looked past him through the cafe window. Across the street, a black sedan idled at the curb. For a heartbeat, I thought it might be Thomas. But when the driver stepped out, I saw a stranger in a suit. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Agent Harper. I asked what happens next. He closed the folder. That depends on how honest everyone decides to be. When he left, I sat for a long time tracing the condensation ring on the table. The waitress asked if I wanted another coffee. I said yes, even though I wouldn't drink it. By the time I got home, Thomas was in the driveway polishing his car. His sleeves were rolled gold watch glinting in the sunlight, the one he'd bought after the villa sale. Hey, gorgeous, he said, grinning. You disappear on me. I had errands, I replied. He nodded, studying me. You look tense. I'm fine. He stepped closer, brushing dust from his cuff. You sure? For a second I saw something flicker behind his charm. A crack, a sliver of uncertainty. Then it was gone. Dinner tonight, he said. Just us. I nodded, forcing a smile. Inside, I went straight to my phone and locked the photos behind a new password. I deleted our old voicemail history. Every move felt like walking a tightrope above a secret I couldn't unlearn. That evening, I cooked salmon and set the table for two. He poured wine, same ritual, same music humming in the background. But the air felt thin, rehearsed. Halfway through dinner, his phone buzzed. He silenced it. Who was that? I asked. He smirked. Work. On a Sunday, you'd be surprised how busy life gets when you're successful. I wanted to say, or guilty, but I swallowed it. Instead, I asked, Are you sure everything's okay? He met my gaze for a moment too long. You still don't trust me. The words felt heavier now, almost taunting. I took a sip of wine to steady myself. I'm trying. He smiled again, the same smile that used to mean safety, but now looked like camouflage. After dinner, I washed dishes while he took a call outside. Through the window, I watched him pace the patio, voice low but urgent. He turned away from the glass door, unaware of his reflection. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw his gestures, quick, defensive, like someone cornered. For the first time, I felt something sharper than fear. Clarity. When he came back inside, his face was calm again. Just business, he said. Always is, I replied. He smiled faintly, but the silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It was waiting. Upstairs, when he fell asleep, I sat by the window and wrote down everything Harper had said. I didn't know if I was protecting myself or building a case. Maybe both. Outside, the streetlights flickered over the snow, and I realized how quiet our neighborhood was. Too quiet for lies, this loud. Tomorrow, I decided I would stop pretending not to know. By Thursday, the silence between us had become a kind of language. Thomas still kissed my cheek in the morning, still called me honey across the room, but every word felt translated from something false. I went through the motions, coffee errands, phone calls, but my mind replayed Agent Harper's voice, the weight of that manila folder I never saw opened. That afternoon, Thomas appeared in the doorway of my study. His smile was bright enough to sting. "We need to get out," he said. "I made reservations, just you and me. 7:30 at Bellini's." Bellini's, the last time we'd gone there was our anniversary before everything started to crack. He winked. "Think of it as a fresh start." My first instinct was refusal, but I caught myself. If he wanted a performance, I could play my part. "I'd love that," I said, voice steady. He looked relieved, almost grateful. "Good. Dress up. I want tonight to feel normal again." Normal. The word hit harder than any threat. When he left, I opened the notebook hidden behind the cookbooks and scribbled down the time, the place, the strange insistence in his voice. Every action had become data, every word a clue. I wasn't sure if I was protecting myself or documenting my own undoing. At dusk, snow flurries began to fall, soft and quiet, muting the world. I dressed carefully, navy wool dress, pearl earrings, the same ones I'd worn the night he signed away our home. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were steady, her mouth a straight line. Thomas honked from the driveway. He was early, always early when he wanted to control the evening. Bellini's glowed from the outside, warm gold light against the cold night. Inside, a string quartet played near the bar, and laughter filled the space like expensive perfume. Thomas held my chair, his manners immaculate. "I've missed this," he said. "Have you?" He smiled. "Of course." We ordered wine. The waiter brought a bottle I didn't recognize, something old and overpriced. Thomas filled both glasses halfway, eyes shining. "To us," he said. I raised my glass but didn't drink. The smell of oak and sugar turned my stomach. He leaned forward. "You've been distant lately." "I've been thinking," I said carefully. "About what?" "About trust." He laughed softly, the sound smooth and empty. "Still on that, Nora. I told you the villa was just business. You need to let it go." "I will," I said, "once I understand what business means." He studied me, the charm slipping for a breath. "You're angry?" "I'm curious." He sighed, reaching for his glass. "I don't know what stories you've been telling yourself, but everything I've done, everything has been for us." "For us," I repeated. "Even the parts I didn't sign." The words hung between us like a knife. He set his glass down too hard. A thin crack spidered up the stem. "You really think I'd hurt you?" "I think," I said quietly. "You've already decided what I should believe." He opened his mouth, then stopped. His phone buzzed. He checked the screen, face tightening for a fraction of a second. Then he smiled again, the mask reattaching. "Nothing important," he said. "Work always." He took another drink, and for the first time I noticed his hand shaking. A small tremor, barely visible but enough. I reached across the table, touching his wrist. "Thomas," I said softly. "Are you in trouble?" He pulled his hand back. Laughed too quick. "Of course not. You watch too many dramas." He looked away, scanning the room like he was waiting for someone. My stomach twisted. I followed his gaze. Two men at the bar. Dark suits, quiet conversation. "Friends of yours?" I asked. His eyes snapped back to me. "What?" "Those men. They keep looking this way." He forced another laugh. "Coincidence." But I saw it, the pulse at his throat, the flash of panic that broke through the surface. The waiter arrived with our entrees, steak for him, pasta for me. I barely tasted it. My phone buzzed once in my purse, and when I glanced at the screen, a single message glowed. "Stay calm. Don't leave yet. No sender ID." But I didn't need one. "Harper." I slipped the phone back into my bag, heart pounding. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Who was that?" "No one," I said. He smiled faintly. "You're not very good at lying, Nora. Neither are you." For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. "You really have changed." "I had to," I whispered. He lifted his glass again, but his eyes darted toward the bar, The men were gone. My pulse quickened. "Thomas," I said, "what did you do?" He didn't answer. The music shifted to something slower, heavier. The candlelight flickered between us, bending his face into shadow. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "If anyone asks, you knew nothing." My chest tightened. "Ask about what?" He looked up. "Just smile. Don't make a scene." I wanted to scream, to stand up, to demand answers, but something in his tone stopped me. He wasn't warning me for his sake. He was afraid. Across the room, the door opened. Cold air swept in, carrying the sound of boots on tile. Thomas's glass froze midair. I didn't turn yet. Not yet. He whispered almost to himself, "They're early." The boots stopped behind me. For a moment, the restaurant noise blurred into a distant hum, Fork's laughter, the clink of glasses, all folding under that silence. Thomas's hand gripped the stem of his wine glass until I thought it might snap. I didn't turn until I heard a calm, steady voice. "Thomas Cole." He looked up slowly, smile frozen halfway, as if he might charm his way out of whatever came next. "That's me," he said, voice steady but thin. The man standing beside our table wasn't a waiter. His jacket opened just enough to show a badge. Behind him, another man waited, broader shoulders, same stillness. "I'm Special Agent David Harper," the first said. His eyes flicked briefly to me, recognition passing like a whisper. "Mr. Cole, we need you to come with us." The room went still. Even the music seemed to pause. Someone at another table laughed awkwardly, as if waiting for a punchline. Thomas gave one of his easy smiles, the same one that used to work on investors, teachers, even me. "Gentlemen, there must be some mistake. This is my wife's birthday dinner." "It's not," I said quietly. His eyes snapped to mine, disbelief cutting through his practiced composure. What I kept my voice calm. "My birthday's in May." A muscle in his jaw jumped. The agent stepped closer. "Mr. Cole, Harper said you're under arrest for wire fraud, falsification of property documents, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent." The words sounded distant, mechanical. Thomas stood but didn't move. His smile gone, now replaced by something smaller. Fear, maybe, or the collapse of denial. People whispered. Someone started recording on their phone. "This is ridiculous," Thomas said, forcing a laugh. "Nora, tell them I stared at the candle between us, the wax dripping slow and thick." "I can't," I said. He blinked, the words hitting harder than the cuffs that clicked around his wrists. "You talk to them," he whispered. I didn't answer. Harper gestured, and the second agent stepped forward, guiding Thomas toward the door. He turned once, looking over his shoulder at me. For a second, I saw the man I'd known for half my life, tired, pleading, human. Then he was gone, swallowed by the flash of cameras and the sudden roar of conversation returning. The door closed. Someone at a nearby table muttered FBI, and the room filled with the low hum of scandal. I felt eyes on me, curious, pitying, hungry. My fingers found the edge of the tablecloth. I wanted to disappear into the pattern. Agent Harper stayed behind, standing quietly by my chair. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. "Mrs. Cole, you should come with us." I nodded but didn't stand yet. "He always hated when things got messy," I said. Harper's gaze softened. "I know." The waiter appeared pale and nervous. "Should I bring the check?" Harper shook his head. "We'll handle it." I reached for my purse automatically, but my hands shook too much to find the clasp. Harper placed a steady hand on my arm. "It's over," he said. But it wasn't, not yet. Outside, the night was sharp and cold. Flashbulbs popped from somewhere down the block. The air smelled of snow and exhaust. I watched as they placed Thomas in the back of the car, his head bowed. He didn't look up. Harper guided me toward his sedan. "You'll need to give a statement," he said. I nodded, numb. "Of course." As we pulled away, the restaurant lights blurred in the rearview mirror, gold smears against the dark. He glanced at me. "You did the right thing." I almost laughed. Does it feel right? It will, he said. But I wasn't sure. The relief didn't come, only a hollow ache where fear had been. We drove in silence for a few minutes before I asked, "Was he alone in this?" Harper hesitated. "Mostly. But he used your identity for several transfers. You were technically listed as co-beneficiary, meaning, meaning if you hadn't spoken today, you'd be sitting beside him." The words sank like stones. I turned to the window, watching snow swirl against the glass. At the station, I signed forms, real ones this time, with my name in full ink. The paper trembled slightly as I wrote, but the signature looked solid. Mine. When they released me hours later, the night had gone quiet again. Harper walked me to my car. "We'll be in touch," he said. As I slid into the driver's seat, I looked up at him. "You knew this would happen tonight." He didn't deny it. "We needed him calm. You helped with that." "So I was bait," I said. "You were proof," he corrected. I started the car. "That's worse." He stepped back, letting me go. I drove home in silence, the headlights cutting narrow paths through falling snow. The house was dark when I arrived. His glass still sat on the counter from before we left, half full, a thin crack running up the side. I touched it, then pulled my hand away quickly. Upstairs, I undressed slowly, folded the navy dress over a chair, and stood in front of the mirror again. My reflection looked older than it had that morning. Tired, but awake. In the hallway, the clock ticked on. The sound was steady now, no longer a countdown. Just time finally moving again. The phone started ringing before dawn. Reporters first, then neighbors, then people I hadn't spoken to in years. Each voice sounded the same, a mixture of sympathy and hunger. I unplugged the line by 7. The silence that followed felt like mercy. Outside, the street glistened with frost. Flashbulbs had left faint circles on the snow near the driveway like ghostly footprints. A car door slammed somewhere, then another. I waited until they gave up. By 8, Lydia called. Her voice broke on the first word. "Nora." I cut her off gently. "Don't." "I didn't know it would go that far," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "You did." Silence stretched between us, fragile and final. Then she hung up. I made coffee I couldn't drink and stared at the empty space across the table. His seat. The chair still held the shape of last night, his glass, his napkin folded neatly. I wanted to throw it all away, but I didn't move. Instead, I went upstairs and packed a bag. Jeans, a sweater, my notebook, and the photos on my phone transferred to a USB stick. Then I drove. The road to the villa was long and pale, winding through the mountains, where pine trees held the snow like secrets. The house came into view around a bend, gray stone against white silence. For a moment, it looked exactly the same, but the door was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale. Dust motes drifted through the thin morning light. The living room felt hollow, the walls stripped bare. Even the photographs were gone. On the kitchen counter sat a single folder left open. My forged signature stared back at me, perfect and cruel. Underneath it, a post-it note in his handwriting. "For you to see what trust costs." I sank into a chair, breath shaking. The note wasn't a confession, it was a defense. He had believed somehow that all of this was still love. The folder's last page held receipts, all in my name. Mortgage statements, transfers, withdrawals. A paper trail of innocence turned to guilt. I closed the folder, placed it gently in my bag. Then I opened the back door and stepped outside. The air cut cold against my face. The mountains stood silent, the valley below heavy with mist. Somewhere far down the slope, I heard a woodpecker tapping, steady as a metronome. For the first time in weeks, I cried. Not loud, not desperate, just tears that came because there was finally room for them. When they stopped, I walked to the edge of the porch. Snow had begun to fall again, soft and directionless. I thought about all the winters spent here, the dinners, the laughter, the illusions of safety. We'd built something beautiful on a foundation of forgery. I took the USB stick from my pocket and looked at it in my palm. It was so small. Everything fit inside, every lie, every proof. I slipped it into my coat close to my heart. As I turned back toward the door, headlights flashed up the drive. For a heartbeat, I froze. Then Harper stepped out of a dark SUV, his expression careful, unreadable. "Morning," he said quietly. I nodded. "You knew I'd come here." "Everyone returns to the scene of what they lost," he said. He approached the porch, boots crunching on the snow. "The bureau cleared you this morning. You won't be charged." I looked past him at the house. "That's not what it feels like." He followed my gaze. "He used you, Nora. You weren't part of it. I signed something once," I said. "A marriage license. That counts." Harper's voice softened. "That's not the same." "No," I said. "But it was binding." He studied me for a long moment, then handed me an envelope. "These are your copies. You should have them." Inside were printed photos from the investigation, Thomas handing off briefcases, meeting strangers in hotel lobbies. The images looked grainy, distant. I barely recognized him. "Where is he now?" I asked. "In federal holding. He's been quiet." "Good," I said. We stood there for a while, the silence between us not heavy, just wide. Then Harper nodded once respectfully and left me to the cold. When I went back inside, the empty rooms felt less like a wound and more like a warning. I took one last look at the hearth ashes from a fire we'd once built, still faintly clinging to the brick, and closed the door behind me. Driving down the mountain, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past was still there, waiting in the fog, but it couldn't follow anymore. It was 3 days before I heard from him again. By then, the headlines had shifted to a senator's scandal, and the reporters had mostly stopped circling the neighborhood. The silence felt different now, not safety, but aftermath. I'd started cleaning the house not because it needed it, but because I didn't know what else to do. Every drawer I opened revealed a smaller deception: bills he'd hidden, letters he'd never mailed, credit cards I didn't recognize. Each discovery felt like a quiet betrayal wrapped in dust. Around noon, a knock broke the stillness. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Agent Harper stood there, his coat dusted with snow, an envelope in his hand. His expression was unreadable, but not unkind. "May I come in?" he asked. I nodded, stepping aside. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and something emptier, the air of a place that no longer had laughter in it. He placed the envelope on the table. "These are the official statements from the investigation. You're cleared of all charges." I looked at it but didn't touch it. "And him? He's still in custody. His attorneys are trying to negotiate, but the evidence is strong." I folded my arms. "How strong?" He hesitated. "Enough that he'll be facing at least 10 years. I thought the number would bring relief, but it didn't. It just sounded like another measurement of time, of loss, of everything that couldn't be undone. Harper watched me quietly. "You don't have to stay in this house, you know. You could sell it, start over." "I'm not sure I want to sell anything else," I said. The words came out colder than I meant. He smiled faintly, understanding. "Fair." I finally opened the envelope. Inside were documents, forms, summaries, photographs. One of them stopped me cold. It was a picture taken weeks ago, Thomas sitting across from a woman at a cafe. His hand rested lightly on hers. I recognized the bracelet on her wrist. I'd seen it once in Lydia's house. My breath caught. Her. Harper nodded. "Her name's Evelyn Grant. She helped him move funds through shell accounts. We think they were involved personally, too." The photograph blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I blinked them away before they could fall. He was always good at delegating. Harper didn't respond. He waited, letting the silence do the work. I slid the photo back into the envelope. "So what happens to her?" "She's cooperating. It'll lessen her sentence." "Of course," I said. My voice didn't shake, but my hands did. I set them flat on the table until the tremor eased. Harper studied me. "You can still file for divorce. The assets tied to your name are safe now." I don't want any of it, I said. I just want it to stop belonging to him. He nodded, then took out another paper, a handwritten statement. There's one more thing. He asked us to give you this. The sight of his handwriting made my stomach twist. I didn't want to touch it, but curiosity won. The note was short, written in his precise, slanted style. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. You always wanted truth. Here it is. No signature. Just his name printed in block letters. I set it down, half expecting it to burst into flames. He still thinks he gave me a gift, I whispered. Harper leaned against the counter. You don't have to read it again. I won't. He looked around the room, neat, sterile, too clean. Do you have anyone staying with you? No. He hesitated. You shouldn't be alone too long. Cases like this, they don't just end when the paperwork does. Something in his tone softened the space between us. You sound like you've seen this before, I said. He met my eyes. More times than I'd like. Most people never realize how quiet life feels when the noise disappears. I thought about that. The house did feel too quiet, as if the walls were waiting for me to say something to start again. Will you testify? He asked gently. If I have to, I said. But I don't think he'll fight. He might not have a choice. We stood there for a long moment, neither speaking. The snow outside thickened, turning the world gray and white. Finally, I asked, Why did you come personally? He smiled slightly. Because you answered the phone. I laughed, then the sound surprising even me. That's a low bar for gratitude. He shrugged. It's a start. When he left, the house felt different, not lighter but balanced. I took the envelope upstairs and locked it in a drawer. Then I sat by the window watching the snow blur the outline of everything familiar. For the first time, I didn't feel like a witness to my own life. I felt like someone rewriting it. The clock ticked quietly in the corner, no longer a warning, but a rhythm. A reminder that time wasn't counting down anymore, it was waiting for me to decide what to do with it. I didn't sleep that night. The letter lay on the kitchen counter, its edges curling slightly from the heat of the nearby lamp. I must have read it a dozen times, not because I needed to understand it, but because I couldn't yet believe the calm in his words. You always wanted truth. Here it is. He'd written it as if confession could replace apology, as if exposure was the same thing as redemption. I sat there until the snow outside turned silver, until dawn crept over the horizon, and the house glowed with that early, lonely light that makes everything look forgiven. By morning, I knew what I had to do. At the federal office, the security guards knew my name before I gave it. Harper met me at the elevator, coat draped over one arm, a faint trace of surprise crossing his face. I wasn't expecting you today. I know, I said, but I'm ready. He studied me for a beat, then nodded. You're sure? I smiled, not out of courage, but out of exhaustion. I've spent my life signing what someone else put in front of me. This time I brought the paper myself. He led me through a narrow corridor that smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. Inside the conference room, a recorder blinked red on the table. A lawyer sat across from an empty chair. Harper gestured toward it. Take your time. I sat, opened my notebook, and unfolded the bank statement, the first piece of evidence I'd kept. The ink had faded a little, but my handwriting along the margins was still sharp, fine, the missing name. When the lawyer began asking questions, I didn't hesitate. I told them everything, the villa papers, the forged signature, the lies about the money, the dinner, the arrest. My voice didn't break once. At one point, Harper slid a copy of my marriage certificate toward me. You can revoke spousal privilege, he said quietly. It's your choice. For a long moment, I stared at the document. My name next to his. A contract that once meant love. I picked up the pen. Revoke it, I said. The sound of the pen scratching across paper was louder than I expected. Final. Not like breaking a vow, it felt more like waking up from it. When I looked up, Harper's expression was unreadable, but I saw something flicker behind his professionalism, a kind of respect. That was brave, he said softly. It was necessary, I replied. Outside, the air was brittle and bright. I walked to my car, the cold biting my fingers, and sat there for a while before starting the engine. I thought of Thomas in his cell, probably rehearsing his defense, still believing he could talk his way out of anything. But words were his weapon. Paper was mine now. On the drive home, I passed the lake we used to visit in the summers. The water was frozen over, smooth as glass, and for a moment I saw our reflection there, the woman who waited and the man who always left first. I pulled over and stepped out. The air smelled of pine and cold metal. From my coat pocket, I took the last of his notes, the one he'd left at the villa. For you to see what trust costs. I tore it in half, then again, until the words disappeared into flakes of paper. The wind carried them across the ice, scattering them until they were indistinguishable from snow. I didn't cry this time. The grief had settled into something steadier, a quiet acceptance that didn't need forgiveness. That evening, Harper called. His voice was steady, but there was warmth beneath it. "You did more today than most people ever manage," he said. "I didn't do it for him," I replied. "I know." There was a pause. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we build the case," he said. "And you start over." I don't know how, I admitted. "Neither do most people," he said. "They just begin anyway." We said goodnight and I stood there listening to the dial tone fade. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence didn't feel hollow. It felt earned. I walked to the study, opened a new page in my notebook, and wrote only one line. "This is where it ends, and I begin." Then I signed my name beneath it, slow and deliberate. For the first time, the ink didn't shake. The courthouse was colder than I expected. The marble floors reflected everything, light footsteps, even the quiet murmurs of strangers waiting to see someone else's ruin. I arrived early, though I didn't know why. Habit, maybe. For 25 years I'd been early for him. I sat in the second row, hands clasped tight in my lap. Harper stood near the aisle, giving me a small nod when he saw me. His face was unreadable the way professionals are taught to be, but I caught the faintest trace of reassurance in his eyes. The courtroom filled quickly, reporters, lawyers, a handful of people from his old firm. Lydia slipped in quietly, sitting a few rows behind me. I didn't turn around. I could feel her regret like static in the air. When they brought him in, the sound of the shackles was softer than I imagined. Thomas looked smaller than I remembered, his suit too big, his hair thinner, the tan from years of business trips already fading. He scanned the room automatically, his salesman's reflex still intact. Then his eyes found me. He tried to smile. It failed. For a moment we just looked at each other. All the noise faded, the shuffle of papers, the coughs, the judge's quiet instructions. The world narrowed to that single silent exchange. His expression wasn't anger. It was disbelief. The same look he'd given me the night I first questioned him about the papers, as if betrayal were something only he could define. When the charges were read, I didn't look away. Wire fraud, money laundering, forgery. Each word landed like a small verdict, not just against him, but against the version of me that believed he was incapable of this. The prosecution began their opening statement, measured, clinical. They spoke about trust, about manipulation, about how Thomas had built a portfolio of deceit. I sat still, heart steady. Then it was my turn. Harper walked me to the stand. The oath felt heavier than it should have, my hand cool against the worn Bible. When I sat down, my pulse slowed. I could feel Thomas watching me. The lawyer's voice was calm. "Mrs. Cole, can you describe the day you realized your name was missing from the villa contract?" I took a breath. It was morning. The light came in through the kitchen window. He'd spread the papers across the table. I asked why my signature wasn't there. He told me I didn't need to worry, that he'd take care of it. Did you believe him? At the time, yes. And later? No, I said simply. A few chuckles rippled through the room. Not unkind, just human. The lawyer continued asking about the withdrawal, the dinner, the arrest. I answered each question carefully, truthfully. My voice didn't shake. When it was over, the defense lawyer stood. "Mrs. Cole," he said, smooth and sympathetic, "would you agree that your husband has always taken care of you financially?" I smiled faintly. "Yes. That's what makes this so tragic." He hesitated, caught off guard. "Tragic. He took care of me," I said, "by making sure I didn't exist." A murmur swept through the room. Even the judge looked up briefly. Thomas shifted in his seat, jaw tight. His lawyer whispered something, but he didn't answer. When I stepped down from the stand, I didn't look back at him. Harper met me halfway down the aisle, his hand steady at my elbow. "You did fine," he said quietly. "I told the truth," I replied. "That's all there was left to do." The verdict came 2 days later, guilty on all counts. I was there again, sitting in the same seat, wearing the same coat. Thomas didn't turn around this time. His lawyer spoke about appeals, but it sounded like ritual more than hope. When the judge read the sentence, 10 years, Thomas finally looked at me. There was no anger, no plea, just the faintest trace of recognition, as if for the first time he saw me not as the woman beside him, but as the witness who had survived him. As they led him away, Lydia sobbed quietly behind me. I didn't move to comfort her. Compassion has limits. Outside, the day was clear and bright, the kind of cold sunlight that makes the air feel thinner. Reporters called my name, but I walked past them, Harper at my side. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm not sure," I said. "But I'm finished." He nodded, understanding. "Sometimes that's enough." We reached the steps, and I stopped for a moment, watching the wind lift the corner of a discarded newspaper. The headline read, "Former broker sentenced in real estate fraud." My name wasn't mentioned. I didn't mind. I took a deep breath, exhaled, and let the chill cut clean through me. For the first time in months, the air felt honest. The courthouse steps felt different the second time. The reporters were still there, but fewer now. Some new scandal had already pulled their attention elsewhere. Those who stayed shouted my name, holding out microphones, asking how it felt to be the wife who didn't know. That phrase followed me all the way to the parking lot. The wife who didn't know. It was meant to absolve, but it sounded like a wound. I didn't answer them. I didn't owe them a story. Harper opened the car door for me. "Do you want us to escort you home?" "No," I said. "I can drive." He hesitated, then nodded. "You did well today." I smiled faintly. "I keep hearing that. What comes after doing well?" He didn't answer right away, usually the hard part. He was right. The house greeted me like a stranger, quiet, clean, and almost too polite. Sunlight fell across the table where the old newspaper lay folded to the headline, "Cole sentenced to 10 years." I read it once, then tore it in half. The phone started ringing again that afternoon. Friends, some real most not called to check in. Lydia's name appeared on the screen twice, but I didn't pick up. I wasn't ready to navigate her guilt yet. Instead, I went outside. The yard was still covered in snow, the kind that glows blue at dusk. I stood there until my breath formed little clouds that drifted and vanished. Freedom, I realized, was quieter than I'd imagined. It didn't arrive with trumpets or declarations. It came in silence, in the space left behind, when chaos finally stopped demanding attention. A week later, Harper stopped by with a box. "Evidence returns," he said simply. Inside were the things they'd taken: my notebooks, the USB drive, the forged documents, all the physical proof of a life split in two. "Do you need me to sign for these?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "No, they're yours." I stared at the box. "I don't think I want them." "Keep them anyway," he said. "You earned the truth. Might as well own it." He lingered by the doorway a moment longer than necessary. "There's a fund," he added, "for victims of financial coercion. It could help with legal fees, relocation, whatever you need." "I'll think about it," I said. "You should." After he left, I carried the box upstairs and set it in the attic. When I closed the lid, it didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like acknowledgement. I didn't need to look at those pages to remember. The next day, I drove to the Women's Trust downtown, the one that helped spouses navigate fraud cases. I handed them an envelope with a check inside. Not large, but enough. The director blinked at the name on the donation slip. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It's money that was supposed to belong to both of us. I'd rather it help someone start over." She smiled gently. "Then it already has." I left before she could thank me again. That night I sat in the living room with a mug of tea, the clock ticking softly. For once the rhythm didn't remind me of countdowns or loss. It sounded like time moving forward, steady, unhurried, alive. I thought about Thomas, about the silence of the cell he must be sitting in now. I didn't wish him harm, but I didn't wish him peace either. I just wished him truth, the kind he'd claimed to give me, but never faced himself. On the mantel, the wedding photo I'd taken down months ago still sat turned backward. I picked it up, studied it for a long time, then placed it in a drawer. Not gone, just out of sight. Tomorrow I'd call a realtor, not to sell, but to ask about something smaller, something that belonged only to me. Maybe a cabin near the lake where winter felt cleaner and the sky a little wider. I didn't know yet what beginning looked like, but I could finally imagine it. When I turned off the lights and walked upstairs, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt mine. The notary's office sat on the edge of town, tucked between a bakery and a small antique shop. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the open door as I stepped inside. It felt like spring had come early that day, the kind that carries both warmth and ache, the quiet realization that winter is over. The clerk behind the counter smiled politely. "Mrs. Cole." "Just Nora," I corrected. It came out easily this time. He nodded, leafing through a stack of papers. "Your purchase agreement is ready. Cabin property, Evergreen Ridge. You can sign whenever you're ready." Cabin. The word had a strange weight to it. Solid, humble, untouched. He slid the papers toward me, and I felt a small tremor run through my hand. Not from fear, but from memory. The last time I'd stared down a legal document, my name had been missing. The space had looked innocent, almost decorative. Now the line waited again, but this time it belonged to me. I took the pen. It felt heavy, deliberate, like it understood what it meant to be used. The ink flowed smoothly, my name curling across the page with a confidence I hadn't realized I'd earned. When I finished, the clerk smiled. "Congratulations." I nodded. "Thank you." He stamped the papers, sealed them, and handed me a copy. The sound of the stamp echoed faintly, final and clean. Outside, sunlight spilled across the street. The air smelled faintly of sugar and sawdust. I stood there for a moment, papers in hand, not ready to drive yet. The world felt both new and achingly familiar. The cabin was smaller than I remembered from the listing. Pine beams, a single stone fireplace, and a window that framed the lake like a painting. The realtor had left the keys on the counter in a neat envelope. I walked through each room slowly: bedroom, kitchen, the small porch that faced the water. The floorboards creaked underfoot, honest in their age. I unpacked a box of books, my old notebook, a mug. The simplicity felt like luxury. Outside, snow still clung to the edges of the trees, but patches of thaw showed dark earth beneath. The lake was half frozen, a mirror breaking free of its own stillness. I stood there, breathing in the scent of pine and smoke from distant chimneys. It wasn't peace exactly. It was presence. Inside, I made tea, sat by the window, and opened my notebook. The first page still held the line I'd written weeks ago. "This is where it ends, and I begin." I added a new line beneath it: "And I will not disappear again." The kettle whistled softly behind me, the sound ordinary and grounding. As dusk settled, I built a fire. The crackle filled the cabin, warm and uneven. I took the official deed from my bag, unfolded it, and looked at my name printed neatly across the bottom. Nora Cole. No missing spaces, no forged strokes, no uncertainty. I traced the letters with my fingertip, then placed the document in a folder on the shelf. Outside, the wind shifted. The snow began to fall again, gentle this time, thin white flakes that vanished as they touched the lake's surface. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and leaned against the window frame. There was a time when I thought trust was something you gave away. But maybe it's something you build quietly, piece by piece, when no one's watching. Maybe it starts when you learn to keep promises to yourself. In the distance, a fox crossed the frozen patch of water, its reflection rippling beneath it. For a moment, it looked like two versions of the same creature, one breaking free, one still trapped beneath the ice. The fire popped softly behind me. I smiled. Now, I whispered, it's mine.